US 64 Westbound. Yeah. Alright, today we're talking about Westbound US Highway 64. This is a continuation from Eastbound 64, as I don't want to make US 64 a super long video, so I split it up into Westbound and Eastbound. And US 64 begins in Arizona and ends in North Carolina. We're actually going to be reversing that and starting in North Carolina and ending in Arizona. US 64 also goes through major cities like Chattanooga, Memphis, Fort Smith, Tulsa, Raleigh, and other places like that, like those major cities. This highway was requested by ThatOtherNorthCarolinian, as they suggest the entirety of US 64. So thank you to them, and let's get started with 64 Westbound. As you can see here, US 64 Westbound begins at the Outer Banks of North Carolina, then goes through North Carolina, southern Tennessee, central Arkansas, basically the entirety of Oklahoma, northern New Mexico, and finally ending in Arizona. So let's get started with Westbound 64. So 64 Westbound begins here at an intersection with US 158 and North Carolina Highway 12, and 64 is going to be heading left here back to mainland North Carolina, where I can stay straight on 158 and go to the Outer Banks itself. Here is one of the many bridges back to mainland North Carolina. And on one of the islands in the Roanoke Sound, we're meeting US 264 for the first time, and US 264 is going to be heading southwest from here. In fact, here is like sort of a mileage sign at this intersection, and 64 is signed west for Williamston, which is 78 miles away, and 264 is signed for Swan Quarter, Belhaven, and Washington. Here in Williamston, we meet US Highway 13 and 17, and we're going to be concurrent with those two highways for a small time. Here, US 17 leaves 13 and 64, and 13 and 64 are going to be concurrent for a while. And here's US 13 leaving from US 64 interchange. And on 13 itself, 64 is now signed west for Tarboro. Honestly, I don't agree with Tarboro, because the only reason Tarboro would be signed is because of, I think, 258. And on going west on 64, you don't even have access to 258 north, or direct access to 258 north. So I don't think Tarboro should be signed westbound. Here is no access to 258 north, as 258 is going to be merging into 64 west. Here is the exit for 258 south, which we do have access, and it's signed for Tarboro and Farmville, while 64 is now signed west for Rocky Mount and Nashville. That's talking about Nashville, North Carolina, not Nashville, Tennessee. Even though this is, I think, the correct way to Nashville, Tennessee, it's not talking about that. It's Nashville, North Carolina is way smaller than Nashville, Tennessee, and it should not be on this mileage sign. Instead, it should be Raleigh. Here we're meeting US 301 in Rocky Mount. We're also meeting Interstate 95, which is correctly signed for Fayetteville and Richmond. Honestly, it's weird that there's no overhead sign for westbound 64 for 95, but there is going eastbound on 64. Here's the Nashville, North Carolina exit, which is North Carolina Highway 58, also exit 459. And then since US 64 is actually a freeway between Williamston and Raleigh, at random interchanges, US 64 is now signed west for Raleigh. Here in the Zebulon area, we have the exit for US 264 East, as 264 West is going to be emerging with us in this US 64 West. And those two highways are going to be concurrent as we head towards Raleigh. Here's the beginning of Interstate 87. And then here we're meeting Interstate 440, and we'll be concurrent with 440 a while. And then here we're actually feeding into Interstate 40 West, and we're signed west for Durham, while 40 East is going to be exiting towards Benson and Wilmington, which is correctly signed. Here's a nice view, or skyline view of the Raleigh downtown from 64 West and Interstate 40 West. And here we are meeting US 70 and 401, which takes you into downtown Raleigh. And here we're splitting off from Interstate 40, and 40 is signed west for RDU Airport and Durham, while 64 is going to be joining with US 1 South. In fact, on that exit, US 1 and 64 is signed south for Cary and Asheboro. Here's US 64 splitting off from US 1 at the famous exit 98 interchange, and 64 is signed west for Pittsboro and Asheboro. And on our way to Pittsboro, we're meeting North Carolina Highway 55 and North Carolina Highway 540 a mile up the road. And then after that 540 interchange, we have a mileage sign, which is Jordan Lake 4 miles away, Pittsboro 13, and Siler City 30. On our way to Pittsboro, we have a nice view of Jordan Lake going westbound on 64. And here are meeting 15 and 501, and they're signed for Chapel Hill, Sanford, and Carthage. While on 15 and 501, 64 is signed west for Siler City. And then we have another mileage sign, and Siler City is 12 miles away, and Asheboro is still the control, which is 32. Here in Siler City, we're meeting US 421. And then here in Asheboro, 64 is going to be bypassing the town of Asheboro, while 64 business is going to be heading into Asheboro. Here we're meeting North Carolina Highway 42. And here's North Carolina's version of the Zoo interchange, or this is the exit to the North Carolina Zoo. And here we are meeting US 220, Interstates 73 and 74, which is signed north for Greensboro and south for Rockingham, and 64 is signed west for Lexington, North Carolina. If you wanna see the US 220 video, it's right here in the top right corner. Here on our way to Lexington, we're meeting Interstate 85. Once we leave 85 business, US 29 and US 70, US 64 meets Interstate 285 and US 52. Here in Moxville, we're meeting US 601, which is the current going through Moxville. We're also meeting the beginning of US 158. Here, US 64 is leaving from US 601 in Moxville still. Here, Interstate 40 we're meeting Interstate 40. And then here in Statesville, we're actually right next to Interstate 40 itself. It looks like there's construction on 40 East. And then near downtown Statesville, US 64 is reuniting with US 21. And then here in downtown Statesville, US 21 is leaving US 64, and US 64 is heading west. Here still in Statesville, we're meeting US 70. And outside of Statesville, we now have a mileage sign, which is for Lenore, which is 21 miles away, and Morganton is 37. Here in Lenore, North Carolina, we're meeting US 321, and here in Morganton, North Carolina, we're meeting Interstate 40 once again. And on Interstate 40 itself, US 64 is signed for Morganton and Rutherfordton. Here in Rutherfordton, we're meeting US 74 alternate, and we're going to be current with 74 alternate till Bat Cave, North Carolina. And then US 64 leaves from 74 alternate in Bat Cave and heads west to Interstate 26. And we're meeting Interstate 26, which is signed west for Asheville and east for Spartanburg, and 64 is signed west for Hendersonville. So after going through Hendersonville and here in north of Brevard, we're meeting US 276 once again. And then here in downtown Brevard, US 276 is leaving US 64 as 64 is heading into the North Carolina mountains. Here in the mountains of North Carolina, we're meeting US 178 once again. And then here in Franklin, we're meeting US 23 and 441. And interesting, US 23 and 441 is signed south for Atlanta, while 64 is signed west for Hayesville and Murphy. Here in Murphy, we're reuniting with 74 and 19 and 129. And then here in outside of Murphy, US 19 and 129 is leaving 64 and 74, and 64 and 74 is side north or west for Chattanooga. Welcome to Tennessee. And then once we get into Tennessee, we have a mileage time. Cleveland 36 miles away. Chattanooga is 64. On our way to Cleveland, Tennessee, we're meeting US 411. And then here in Cleveland, US 74 is leaving, even though there's no mention of it, and 64 is heading into Cleveland itself. And then here in Cleveland, we're reuniting with US 11, and we're going to be currently with US 11 through the Chattanooga metro area. On our way to meeting Interstate 75, we meet US 74. And then here, we're meeting Interstate 75. And then 4 miles down the road, US 11 64 is leaving Interstate 75 to head into downtown Chattanooga. Here in downtown Chattanooga, we're reuniting with US 41 and 72, and we're going to be current with those highways for a brief time. In fact, here is US 11 leaving from 41, 72, and 64. And if you want to see the concurrency with 41, 72, and 64, go and check out the US 72 video. Here in South Pittsburgh, Tennessee, US 64 is going to be joining with Interstate 24 West. And here is 64 leaving from 24, and 64 is signed west for Winchester, Tennessee. Here in Winchester, we're meeting US 41 alternate and 64 business. And then after going through Winchester, here in Fayetteville, Tennessee, US 64 is going to be joining with US 231 and here's US 231 reuniting with US 431, and 64 is going to continue heading west. In fact, on our way to our next town in Pulaski, we're meeting Interstate 65, and on 65 itself, 64 is signed west for Pulaski and east for Fayetteville. Here in Pulaski, Tennessee, we're meeting US 31, and on 31, 64 is now signed west for Lawrenceburg. Here in Lawrenceburg, we're meeting US 43, and on 43 itself, 64 is now signed west for Waynesboro. On our way to Waynesboro, we meet the Natchez Trace Parkway once again. And then here in Waynesboro, this is on Tennessee Highway 13. 64 is now signed west for Savannah. On our way to Savannah, Tennessee, we're meeting US 641. And it's funny that 641 and 64 have 64 in the numbers. Here in Selmer, Tennessee, we're meeting US 45. We're going to be current with 45 through the outskirts of Selmer. And then here is 64 leaving from 45, and the 64s continue west towards Memphis. In fact, here in Bolivar, we're meeting on Tennessee's Highway 125 and 18. And 18 is going to be current with 64 through the town, or through Bolivar. And then, outside of Bolivar, Tennessee Highway 18 leaves, and 64 continues west towards Memphis, and on the outskirts of Memphis, we're meeting Interstate 269. And then we're also meeting Interstate 40 once again as we continue heading towards into Memphis. Here, on our way towards downtown Memphis, we're reuniting with 70 and 79, and these three highways are going to be going through Memphis. On our way to downtown Memphis, we're meeting Interstate 40 and 240. And then here we're meeting the Sam Cooper Boulevard, which is a boulevard in Memphis. And here's the beginning of US 72. And so after meeting the beginning of US 72, US 51 is going to be joining the three highways as just to cross over Interstate 240, and then it literally leaves right before we enter downtown Memphis. And then here in downtown Memphis, we're meeting the beginning of US 78. And then as we go through downtown Memphis, and here reuniting with US 61, 61, 70, 79, and 64. Are be heading west to Interstate 55 and joining onto Interstate 55 to head west into Arkansas. In fact, here we are on the bridge on our way into Arkansas. And then literally right after 70, 79, and 61 literally leave, and 64 is concurrent with 55 for 10 miles, and 64 leaves at exit 10 and is signed west for Marion, Sunset, and Wine. Here, after leaving Interstate 55, 64 is signed west for Wine, which is 40 miles away. And then here we are in Wine, Arkansas. We're meeting Arkansas Highway 1. And then literally after that our interchange, US 64 is signed west for Fair Oaks 13 miles away and Bald Knob 45. Here near Fair Oaks, Arkansas, we're meeting US 63 and 49. And then here in Bald Knob, we're meeting with US 67 and 167, and we're going to be current with 167 South and 67 South for like 30 miles. Interesting that here in Arkansas, 67 North is actually signed for St. Louis. Here in Beebe, Arkansas, 64 is leaving 67 and 167 and is heading west towards Beebe and Conway. Here in Conway, Arkansas, we're meeting Interstate 40 once again. And then we're also meeting US 65 Business. We're going to be current with 65 Business for a brief time. Here we're leaving from 65 Business to head west. And then after we go through in the outskirts of Conway, we have a mileage sign, and 64 is now signed for Morrilton, Arkansas. In fact, here in Morrilton, we have another mileage sign, and now we're signed for Russellville, which is 24 miles away. Here in Russellville, we're meeting Arkansas Highway 7 and 27, even though only 7 signed. Maybe the 2 fall off, but I don't know why only 7 is signed, but Highway 7 takes you to Interstate 40. Here in the outskirts of Russellville, we're now signed west for London, Arkansas. Here in London, now we're signed west for Clarksville. Here in Clarksville, we're meeting Interstate 40 once again. And then here in Mulberry, and like up the road, we're now signed for Alma, which is 12 miles away from here. In fact, here in Alma, 71 Business is reuniting with US 64, and we're meeting current with 71 Business as we go through Fort Smith. In fact, on our way to downtown Fort Smith, we meet Interstate 540, and 540 is signed south of Fort Smith, while 540 is signed north to Interstate 40. And on 540 itself, 64 is signed west for Van Buren. Here in Fort Smith, 64 and 71 is leaving Arkansas Highway 59 north. Here in downtown Fort Smith, US 64 is leaving 71 Business and 271 to head west into Oklahoma. Here we are crossing the river into Oklahoma. Welcome to Oklahoma. And then here we are in eastern Oklahoma. We're meeting Interstate 40. And then here we are 14 miles up the road. We're meeting Interstate 40 for the last time. Well, directly, we have US 64 meets roads that directly lead Interstate 40. This is the last direct exit on Interstate 40 itself for 64. Here in Sallisaw, Oklahoma, we're meeting US 59. And then 59 leaves after we go through downtown Sallisaw. Here we are meeting the Muskogee Turnpike. Here in Warner, Oklahoma, just south of Muskogee, we're meeting US 266, which is one of 2 of US 66 child routes still in existence today, and 266 takes you into Interstate 40. Here in Muskogee, Oklahoma, we're meeting US Highway 69, and we're going to be concurrent with 69 as you go through Muskogee, Oklahoma. And then here we are reuniting with US 62 as US 62 and 64 leaves Muskogee. And then outside of Muskogee, we have a mileage sign, which is for Muskogee, which is 40 miles away, and Tulsa is 46. Here in literally the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, 64 is leaving 62, and 64 is heading to Tulsa. Here we are in Tulsa, and we're actually meeting the beginning of US 169. Here, as we US 64 leaves US 169 to head west towards Sand Springs, which is, I think, a suburb in Tulsa. Well, 169 is heading north to Owasso. Here we are meeting Interstate 44, which is signed west for Oklahoma City and east for Joplin. And then once we get near downtown Tulsa, we're reuniting with Interstate 444 and US 75. We're going to be joining with 75 South and 440 West for St. And then here is 440, and now we're reuniting with 244, and we're going to be joining 244 East to head west. And then here's the exit over 64 West, and we're going to be finally reuniting with 412 for a while. We're now assigned west for Sand Springs, which is here outside of Cleveland, Oklahoma. 64 is now assigned west for Cleveland, Bristow, and Pawnee. And after going through Cleveland, Bristow, and Pawnee, we're meeting US 177 outside of Perry, Oklahoma. Here we are in Perry, and we're meeting US 77 and US 64 assigned west. Here we're meeting Interstate 35. Okay, we're going to take a time out here and talk about Interstate 35. So now 35 is supposed to be signed for Wichita North and Oklahoma City South around this area, but apparently it's not. As you can see here, Oklahoma northbound, after passing out of the outskirts of Oklahoma City, it's signed north for Guthrie for 11 miles, and then north of Guthrie it's signed for Perry for roughly 30 miles. And then north of Perry, it's signed for Tonkawa, which is for another 30 miles. And then north of Tonkawa, it's signed north for Blackwell for basically 8 miles. And then finally, once you pass this town of Blackwell, you're finally signed north for Wichita. And then for the southbound, it's signed for Perry from south of Blackwell, and then Guthrie. And then finally, once you're past south of Guthrie, it's signed for Oklahoma City. In fact, the only time that Interstate 35 is correctly signed at interchanges is these 3 exits here. Which this just aggravates me, because why is only 3 exits correctly signs 35 while a whole bunch of small ones and like other major intersections like US 77, US 60, and US 64 signed for these small towns. It just doesn't make any sense. Anyways, so back to 64. Here is the 412 and 64 exit, as 64 and 412 is heading west to Enid. And then here in Enid, 64 is leaving 412 to bypass the city. And then here we are merging into US 81 and US 60 as we head north from here. Here at a random like 4-way stop in the middle of nowhere, 64 is leaving 80 and 81 and US 60 to head west into the Oklahoma Panhandle. Here in Alpha, Oklahoma, we're meeting with US 281, and 281 is going to be current with 64 as we go through the small town of Alpha. Here is US 281 leaving 64, and 64 is continuing west. Here is US 183 joining US 64 and outside of Buffalo, Oklahoma. Here in Buffalo, US 64 is leaving US 183 and US 64 is continuing west here in the Panhandle of Oklahoma. In fact, now we're meeting US 283, and 283 is going to be current with 64 for a while. And here's 283 leaving 64, and 64 is going to continue west through the rolling green hills of western Oklahoma. Here's the roadside picnic area attraction again, and 270 is now going to be concurrent with 64 for a while. In fact, here in Turpin, Oklahoma, we're going to be joining US 83, and 64 is going to be current with 83 South, while 270 is going to be joining with 83 North. So US 64 leaves US 83 after going through Turnpin, and then here in Hooker, Oklahoma, we're going to be joining with US 54, and 64 and 54 in the current going through Hooker. After going through Hooker, US 64 leaves, and here in Diamond, Oklahoma, we're reuniting with 412, and US 64 and 412 are actually going through the west of Oklahoma together. In fact, here we are reuniting with US 56, and 412 and 64 and 56 are going to make current with each other as we go through the west of Oklahoma. Here is US 287, and Oklahoma does good here at this intersection because, look, instead of Lyman, Colorado, 287 is signed north for Denver. Yay! Here in Boise City, we have the roundabout interchange, and we're going to now in US 385 is now going to be concurrent with us as we go through the Oklahoma Panhandle. Here is US 385 leading 412, 56, and 64 in the middle of nowhere. And here we are entering into New Mexico, and this sign is weird because of 56 and 412 are sharing a sign. Why not 56 and 64? Here in Clayton, New Mexico, 64 is going to be joining with US 87, and they're going to be current until Interstate 25. Here in Raton, New Mexico, US 64 is going to be joining with Interstate 25 South, while 87 is going to be joining with 25 North. Those 64 is concurrent with 25 South for 5 miles, and exit 446. 64 is signed west for Taos. This is the downtown Taos, New Mexico. And then here, as we're about to enter into the mountains of central northern New Mexico, we're meeting US 285. Sorry for the picture. This is the only one, and it's from 2008. Looks like Google doesn't come here that often. Here in the middle of nowhere in the mountains of New Mexico, we're joining US 84, and we're going to be current as we go through Chalma. In fact, here in Chalma, New Mexico, 64 and 84 is leaving New Mexico 17. Here in the middle of nowhere, 64 is leaving 84 to head west to Farmington. Right here, on our way to Farmington, here in Bloomfield, we're meeting US 550, and 550 is going to be current with 64 as we go through Bloomfield. Here is 550 leaving 64. And then here in the big city of Farmington, we have a truck route and a business route, and business 64 takes you downtown Farmington. Well, just normal 64 is a truck bypass for Farmington. Here in Shiprock, New Mexico, we're going to be joining with US 491, also known as former US 666. And after crossing the San Juan River, US 64 is going to head west to its western terminus. In fact, after going through 19 miles of barren New Mexico desert, we're re-entering into Arizona. And then literally 5 miles later, we have a US 64 end sign in Chico, Arizona. And so with that, we're going to be ending US 64 and moving on to the TheDerpHog's the way it should be. The TheDerpHog's the way it should be for 64 West. I'd start with Williamston, then Rocky Mount, not Tarboro, then Raleigh, then Pittsboro because of 15 and 501, and then Asheboro because of 220, 73, and 74, and then Lexington because of 85, and then Statesville because of 70 and 40, and then Lenore because of 321, and then Morganton because of Interstate 40 once again, and then Hendersonville because of 26, and then Brevard, and then Franklin because of 23 and 441, and then Murphy because of 74, 19, and 129, and and then Cleveland because of US 11, and then Chattanooga because Chattanooga is famous, and then Jasper because of its concurrency with 72 and 41. I'm gonna sign it for, and then South Pittsburgh because it's 72, and then Winchester because of 41, and then Fayetteville because of 231 and 431, and then Pulaski because of 31, and Interstate 65 is outside of Pulaski, and then Lawrenceburg because of US 43, and then Selmer because of US 45, and then Memphis because Memphis is a very famous city, and west of Memphis I'll actually do Bald Knob because of 67 and 167, and then Conway because it's a major city in central Arkansas, and then Russellville because it's a major college town in central Arkansas, and then Clarksville, and then Alma because of 71, and then Fort Smith because of how big it is, and then Sallisaw because of 59, and then Muskogee because of how big the city is, and then Tulsa from Muskogee because Tulsa is a famous city as well, and then Cleveland, Oklahoma because of even though it's one of the 3 small towns mentioned, if you're gonna go to like Oklahoma City or other places, you would probably stay on like 412, and then Perry, Oklahoma, and then Enid from 412 and 64 and 35, and then Alva because of 281, and then Guyman because of 54, and then Boise City because of 385, and then Clayton, New Mexico because of US 87, and then Raton because of Interstate 25, and then Taos and then Chama again because of 84, and then Bloomfield because of US 550, and then Farmington because it's a major northwestern New Mexico town or city, and it's fine to sign it on state or US highway, and then Shiprock, and then finally the Four Corners National Monument, because I'm guessing the reason why people would take 64 West far out that way is for the Four Corners National Monument, or you can ditch, or if you want to stay on US 160, US 160 actually is angling towards Flagstaff, Arizona. So thank you guys so much for watching US 64 Westbound. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making the video. For the rest of August and into partially September, I'm going to be working on those requested highways that I was sent. And then starting probably mid-September or like early October, I'm going to be starting my new series where I'm going to be going through each of the lower 48 states' longest state highway and see how their control cities stack up to US highways and interstates, because I got positive review that people would like to see that. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.